Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to start by saying that when I first had concerns about my child being autistic, I had inquired with her regular primary care provider, her PCP, about my concerns with her meeting milestones. I had the book, what to expect when you're expecting and what to expect in the first 3 years or whatnot. And I was just kind of monitoring things. She was my first child. And her doctor just kept telling me and saying, oh, every child's different and she'll eventually do these things. Well, then I'd come in for her next checkup. And of course, my child is also vaccinated. I'm not getting into the whole immunizations. That's not the purpose of this video. But she was up to date on all of her immunizations and stuff like that. And I have a lot of different concerns. A lot of things are going on all at once, and I'm not blaming it on any certain thing, but the doctor just basically kept, minimizing the situation and saying, "Oh, everything will just be fine. I'm just a paranoid new parent." But by the time my baby was probably, I'm guessing, 8 to 10 months old, it was becoming even more noticeable that like she wasn't smiling or cooing or like engaging or being interested in anything. Was really super easy to take care of. And so I kept stressing my concerns, and the doctor finally said, okay, let's do an auditory, a hearing, not auditory, but a hearing assessment on her. So she had went to the local hospital specialist to get her hearing checked, and that all turned out fine. I don't know all the logistics of that and how they were able to determine her hearing was fine if she couldn't respond and let them know, but they got special technology to do that. In any event, I was then referred to the Developmental Services Center, which needed to come in and do evaluation. Now, the lady was there for less than 20 minutes to see my child and told me that she thought my child was autistic. And I was in complete denial about it. I didn't want to believe that a woman spending, 20 minutes or less with my child could tell me if she was autistic or not. And so I started doing the research, and it just broke my heart because the more that I read and researched about it, the more I realized that, she was most likely probably right, as much as I didn't want to believe it. So then, at this time, Dory was 2.5 years old. She would be turning 3 later that summer in July, and this evaluation was going on in January of 2006, and her birthday was in July 2006. So we had a team of therapists come, and she said, let's go ahead. Let's not wait for a diagnosis. Excuse me. She said, let's not wait for a diagnosis, and let's go ahead and get therapists in here and start intervention now. And then, when I scheduled the appointment for my daughter to see a child developmental specialist to get her diagnosis of autism, or even to just confirm it, actually, it was 6 months from there. It was like a long waiting list to even be able to see this doctor. So I was a little annoyed at that, but I was thankful that we could go ahead and start therapy. So she started with developmental therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. I took her to some speech programs that the University of Illinois had here. And then I also did some play project and DIR floor time with her. And these therapists were great. But the sad thing for me is that once she turned 3, they were no longer able to see her again. And I was really confused and disappointed by that. I thought, well, they just got to get to know her, and we're making progress, and they're teaching me to do certain things, and well, now they have to go. And she says, well, once the child turns 3, early intervention stops seeing them, and then they recommend me putting her in preschool Head Start. So I started her in early childhood education center, and she was getting speech and occupational therapy there, but only like 15-30 minutes a week. And sometimes, I think at one point it was like 15 minutes a day, but that's not near enough. And I thought, well, she did, and I skipped, sorry, let me go back, rewind a little bit. In July, when she finally did see that specialist, she was diagnosed with severe autism. So then later that year, she started at early childhood center, which I told you she started speech and occupational therapy, but it wasn't enough, and she had to all of a sudden start seeing all these new therapists and teachers. And then she wouldn't be seeing those people long, because then she would, graduate out of early childhood and start going to elementary. So it's through these phases of not being able to see people consistently. But I still try to do things at home, read up, do my research, do things for, to implement these therapy recommendations in my home based off what the therapist would show me to do and stuff like that. And then what the school would recommend. And I always thought, their IEPs were very basic and bland. And so anyway, after the early childhood center, we had moved from Illinois to Tennessee, and I put my child in school there and had her, get set up with a new doctor, and had her go and get some extensive testing done at the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital to get like CAT scan and like Fragile X syndrome testing and a whole host of other things. And she started going to the Autism Foundation for therapy. But in the midst of this, I had to actually take her out of public school because she was getting mistreated in the public school. They were actually putting her in a closet with other special needs kids and leaving them in there for like an hour or two a day. And I kept wondering why she was coming home with her hair messed up. And I thought one day, I said, I'm going to go into her school and just kind of check on her, because I had an IEP meeting that day. And I thought, I'm going to go a little earlier and just, kind of peek in and see how she's doing. Well, when I peeked in, I didn't see her anywhere in the classroom. And I was like, well, where is she? And I checked everywhere and asked everywhere, and well, we don't know where they're at. Then I saw this weird light coming from a closet that had this little window in it. And there was a teacher in there, and that little light was her cell phone. She was sitting on a chair on a cell phone, the teacher was, in the closet, in a storage closet with boxes piled to the ceiling, and had these little mats, and was having all these, now this was a special needs class, had all these special needs kids, both boys and girls of different ages, in there with my daughter laying on the floor. I don't know what could have happened to her in that, and I was just furious. Okay, I was really concerned. And then I had also watched them try to do PECs, which is picture exchange communication, and they would just grab the kid's hand and grab the picture on the board and then just throw it into a basket. And I knew from my experience with PECs that that was not the proper way to do it. So I removed her out of that school, and we moved to a different town, and I put her in school there. Again, bad experience, poor IEP program, teachers not properly trained. And look, I know it's not easy at all, but when you're claiming to be inclusive, and you're claiming to have special needs programs, you'd think someone would have the knowledge they need to actually, help your child. But this wasn't the case. They weren't able to handle her. They weren't able to have an assistant for her. Again, their IEP was very poor. They didn't offer near enough intervention as far as speech and sensory issues go, and like helping her with skill acquisition and academics. It was all about how can we get this child just to behave the way we think she should. So I was really frustrated, and I finally just said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I am going to take her out of public school. I'm going to homeschool her, and I'm going to outsource other resources and trainings and try to get help that way for her. And so I'll make another video on that.